to the next edition of Fridays with Fintelekt. My name is Shirish Pathak. I head Fintelekt Advisory Services. And for those of you who don't know what we do, we are focused on research, training, and advisory in the area of anti-money laundering, countering terrorist financing, and related financial crime and investigation matters. In Fridays with Fintelekt, we will publish a webcast every Friday, at which I will engage in conversation with thought leaders in the AML-CFT space in our quest to bring you additional knowledge and insights in this fast-moving field. This webcast will also be available as a podcast later on Spotify and on anchor.fm. So in case you would like to view it again or would like to share it with friends, feel free to direct them to these two channels and search for Fintelekt. So today's episode is a special one focused on the Bangladesh banking industry. And I have two guests with me here today. The first is Abdullah Al Mamun, who is the General Secretary of the Association of AML Compliance Officers of Banks in Bangladesh, called AACOBB. And he is also the Senior Executive Vice President and CAMLCO, which means Chief Anti-Money Laundering Compliance Officer of Dutch Bangla Bank. He has had a long career in banking, having served before this in Standard Chartered Bank and HSBC in Bangladesh. My second guest today is Sarwar Chowdhury. Sarwar was the former Deputy Managing Director of Eastern Bank and also the ex-chairman of AACOBB, and has had a long banking career, having worked with Islami Bank Bangladesh, Standard Chartered Bank, Citibank, American Express, and IFIC Bank. He has also had the distinction of being the longest-serving CAMLCO in the Bangladesh banking industry. So since we decided to have a Bangladesh-focused episode, I could think of no one better than these two gentlemen to have here with us today, as they are both very, very knowledgeable and very well respected by regulators, bankers, and their fellow colleagues in the Bangladesh banking industry and across the region. So Mamun and Sarwar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Shirish, for having us.
So Mamun, let me pose my first question to you, and Sarwar, feel free to jump in whenever you would like to. Mamun, what do you think are the practical difficulties that you are facing in AML compliance operations, transaction monitoring, and reporting, especially since a large portion of the staff will probably be working remotely or from home? How are banks in Bangladesh overcoming these difficulties?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shirish. I think it's really a very timely concern for all the industry at this moment. Yes, obviously, you know that in Bangladesh, the first corona victim was detected on 8th of March. And since then, actually, the regulator has been taking on those areas. And with effect from 26th of March, actually, Bangladesh Bank has been actively involved with all the banks and the other regulators to issue circular and ensuring that banks should be only opened on a limited scale, particularly to cater the services and some remittance and some important trade transactions. And obviously, the functions like AML and other peripheral services are preferred to be done from the home. So that is why actually all banks are working from the home working or VPN system, so that they can actually continue the issues and the concerns with the management. So you can understand that in Bangladesh that there are 4 types of banks operating in Bangladesh: foreign banks, Islamic banks, government banks, and local private banks. So obviously foreign banks have a better working system from home. They can actually check their all FCC related system from home. Particularly I talk about SCB, Standard Chartered, HSBC, Citi. So they have that scope to do the monitoring from their home for all the transaction monitoring alerts, etc. Obviously, the local bank doesn't have that specific penetration into the system. But what they do, like they have their contact with each of the branches through VPN and other home working system, so that they can get the feedback from the branches on any sort of an unusual transactions. Because you know that in our system, like the central bank has a unique system of having probable transaction profile for each of the customer. So in the UBS, in the banking system, so the customers are having a sort of an expected turnover level in the system. So if there is any sort of an unusual transaction, they can ask and they can do the duration, they can take note of those accounts and they can refer those accounts later to FCC department team or chemical department. the decentralized model of the government banks, they can't actually do everything from home, but obviously they are sending one or two staff to this head office to keep liaison with the remittance department or to the cash department or to this sort of branch operations, so that they can also give support to the branches. So now these sort of home working systems are working, and almost all the banks are actually having a sort of a regular meeting from around 10 or 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day, and they're taking feedback from each of the branches or the divisional heads on any concern in terms of the ML issues or in terms of operations, so that, and also they can keep the senior updated on the concerns or the challenges on the AML aspect. So you know that recently, though the normal sort of an account opening or the sort of an regular submitting of returns or regular monitoring of all the works is not possible or not actually demanded by the regulator, but obviously the central bank is in touch with the stakeholders, particularly with us, with the AACOBB. They're talking with us over phone, and they're giving instructions to ensure some of the core areas. And what they have done to ensure the financial inclusion, you know, that they have actually given a sort of flexible guidance to open salary accounts for the government's worker and the sort of an industry workers, so that they can have the access through their mobile bank to withdraw the account. And that is why central bank has prescribed to have a separate product code ID, so that they can open the account, and obviously banks or the CAMLCOs or the respective departments can ensure that these accounts can be remediated after a certain period of time. Although the thumb rule is there that we should check the NID or the birth certificate and verify them. But if that is not possible, that is the last resort that they are saying that you can open the account with a separate product ID and open the account. So these are the actually not a challenge for all the banks, but with some of the banks and some of the Bikash, Rocket, Nagad, and this sort of banks who are providing mobile financial services. So these are so far challenges being mitigated by the banks with their sincere interest. And actually, I have talked to around 20 to 25 banks so far in the last couple of days, and almost all of them are keeping contact with their operations, with their branches. If there are any sort of an issues or concerns coming and cropping up, they are trying their level best to address it. But obviously, on day-to-day basis, the regular transaction monitoring, the regular submission or report that are not done. But obviously, you know that will be coming probably in next session. Like the central bank has also given some flexibility. Shirish.
Right. Thanks, Mamun. And you know, do you think there is an increased regulatory risk now because of these challenges and possible backlogs which are happening? And in the same vein, do you think the Bangladesh Financial Intelligence Unit, the BFIU, would be likely to take a lenient approach towards these timelines? Have you had any evidence of it so far?
Yes, Shirish, as I said, like you know that the main regulatory circular is being issued by the BRP, Banking Regulation Policy Department, and there is another department who actually looks after the supervisors, that is the DOS, Department of Supervision. Both the departments have actually given circulars to all the banks that they will be extending the date of submission of returns from being the situation coming to the normal, and they can have a buffer of 10 days on top of that. So on that angle, I have also talked to the central bank, BFIU. They are also flexible in terms of their submission of return. Like, you know, this cash transaction report, CTR is supposed to be submitted on 21st of the following month. So all the banks are having the same concern that whether they can submit the return on time. So we talked to central bank, and BFIU said, don't worry, you try your level best to prepare the returns. But obviously, we'll be trying to give you further guidance. But don't worry about the deadline. They have a sort of flexible attitude to accept the return. But almost I have taken a survey with the banks. Almost all the banks have generated the return articulated the return from their IT department. They have sent it to the respective branches, but obviously all branches are not open at this moment, so they are not getting the feedback on the CTR return. But the part those are sort of an eligible to be submitted, then we can send it or submit it in GoML portal. And for rest of the one, we can take an sort of a flexible time. We're talking to the regulator. And in terms of the issues and challenges, obviously there will be number of returns, number of queries, number of production order, number of STR will be increased after the situation. But you know, the situation as the number of transactions has reduced, and the other sort of complexities are sort of reduced in terms of transactions and onboarding. So the anticipated risks are relatively low in terms of the AML, but obviously we can think of the internet or the other channel related fraud for their issues. So for that reason, actually all banks are sort of well prepared. Like each of the banks are having their IT department, their IT security department, their trust division. They are actually circulating sort of an awareness message to all the departments. And similarly, actually, we from AACOBB and the senior bankers are also circulating awareness sort of message to all the banks, so that they can keep concentration on those sort of internet fraud and phishing mail, this sort of thing. And we are checking adverse news daily, because we got some feedback from some online portal. So we are checking those adverse news. And for an example, we are having 1 or 2 cases on terrorist financing. We have blocked those accounts. We have got some sort of an misappropriation of relief food. We got some concern on some sort of domestic violence. We got some sort of an Rohingya push-in. So these were there, and these are also at this moment in pretty much in low figure. But the law and order enforcing agencies and the media is pretty much alert at this moment, so that they are actually escalating the issues in the forum or the news media, so that actually banks are also getting alert on those issues, and they can jump on it whenever it is required. Shirish.
Thanks, Mamun, for that. Before I head to Sarwar for his comments, let me just ask you one more question, Mamun. You know, has the support from third-party technology suppliers or streaming vendors, has that been impacted, or is everything going on fine? Is there any advice that you'd like to give banks, you know, to mitigate the risks in this area?
Yeah, very right, Shirish. Like I talked to quite a number of banks. Like almost every project that were associated with third-party vendors and suppliers had been sort of delayed, or some were postponed. But obviously, like banks like SEVP, City, and HSBC, they are sort of a support service team in either in Chennai or in Colombo. They are actually only serving the critical issues or critical factors, but they are not providing support on the routine issues. Similarly, banks like us or any Islamic bank or Rupali Bank, Janata Bank, they were in some negotiation with third-party vendors in terms of having third-party software like SAS or Acuity or Tetas or whatever it is, in terms of transaction monitoring, in terms of sanction screening. Those are to some extent bit postponed or delayed, but the vendors are keeping contact with us on email. Some of them were taking some classified information through secure database, but some of them were asking for cloud information in cloud. But in most of the banks actually are not allowing this sort of sharing of database. So that is why the normal mode of operation or normal support from the third-party vendors are not smooth. But we are actually keeping our senior management abreast on that one, that the project will be delayed. But obviously, we are also getting a positive connotation and affirmation from the third-party vendors that they will try their best to resolve those issues as soon as the situation is normal. Shirish.
Right. Thanks, Mamun. Sarwar, let me come to you now. You know, since the current crisis is probably going to result in higher levels of non-performing assets in the industry, maybe in the near to midterm, do you think there will be potentially increased mindshare on credit risk at the cost of focus on AML CFT risk within the bank? What are your thoughts on this?
Sure, Shirish, thank you. See, the business, all business activities have shut down almost, at least in our country. And therefore, it is natural to expect that the NPL will increase because past dues will be piling up. And the focus going forward after, all this is over, hopefully, the focus is definitely going to be towards business, how to strengthen the business of the banks. And of course, credit is a very important part of that. See, there is, as even now, even before COVID, there was always a tension, between the compliance department and the rest of the business, rest of the departments in the bank. And that will, I think, intensify. The tension that was already there, but we were managing it, and I think that this tension between the different departments, because the priorities will change, and I hope the management will give the compliance side the same support that they have been doing, but they will be also under pressure to perform, to fix things. And therefore, yes, the focus will be on the business side, on the credit side, than on compliance.
Right. Mamun, what are your views on this? Yes, I just like to supplement with Sarwar. Like, that the problem of NPL has been for quite a long time in Bangladesh, particularly for the government banks. And that is why actually the finance minister and the central bank has given sort of a flexibility to the customers to have a sort of an rescheduled status. They are enjoying some sort of an flexible terms in terms of repaying the loans. And there has been some prescription from the central bank to put a cap on the loan interest on 9% and deposit on 9%, loan on 9% and deposit on 6%. So banks are actually really struggling on keeping their profitability at this stage. And obviously they need to do some business simultaneously. And the incentive package that you have so far heard from the central bank, like the government is like, which is around 73,000 crore in Bangladesh, 72,750 crore, and which will be mostly actually disbursed through the banks. So banks will be actually at the very core of the due diligence and the other necessary verification of the necessary assessment issues. So the bigger challenge are with the banks to ensure that these funds are actually properly distributed. And that in the last CAMLCO conference, like we had this credit risk was one of the core issues that were discussed in our last CAMLCO conference, because there have been a few cases that the central bank or the regulators thinking that some fund could have been diverted or siphoned from the NPL to some other countries. So that is why actually all banks and all the central bank regulatory authorities are very much concerned on that part to ensure that the credit disbursement are given properly after due diligence and proper assessment, and the LPL is also critically followed up and recovery action is also taken care of, so that these are not mismanaged. So that is why, and I'm also in discussion with the senior management during the meeting. So what I've seen, like, yes, obviously banks have to do business, but the senior management and the board are pretty much concerned on the due diligence part, because there have been a number of turmoils, there have been a number of pressures from the stakeholders, from the businessmen as well. But in terms of procedures, banks will remain on their standard, what I believe.
So, Saraj,
right. Thanks, Mamun. Sarwar, you are also in touch with most of the senior management or board members of banks in Bangladesh. I mean, do you get the same sense as what Mamun was mentioning? What is your feedback on that?
Sure. Well, Mamun is right. There is a focus on non-performing loans even before this COVID situation arose, and now in Bangladesh, like TBML, they're also trying to mitigate loan-based money laundering. So that focus has been there from BFIU also during the CAMLCO conference. These were the main themes, I understand. And some resolutions have been adopted in the CAMLCO conference, and based on that, the new TBML guidelines have been issued also. So, as Mamun said, yes, there is a focus, but see, here the entire bank business activities are shut down. So even, companies which were never past due are likely to fall into that situation. I'm not saying all of them will, but it is only natural that the focus will be shifted to the business side, the credit side, because all banks are also suffering. The volumes are down. The banks are running at 50% or less. Some banks are even 30%. So I'm sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
Anyway, so that focus, that challenge, however, small, it will be there. It will be there.
Right. So, Mamun and Sarwar, what is your advice to all the financial crime compliance teams, the AML teams, CFT teams, which are working in all the other banks in Bangladesh? What would you say to them during these difficult times?
So, I'm taking the real scenario at this moment. That though our regular activities from the ML department is so far not that vibrant, but we have a number of issues on our plate. We have the TBML guideline, which is actually supposed to be implemented this year. We have the eKYC guideline that has been also circulated from the Central Bank. That is also supposed to be implemented this year, by the end of this year. And they have actually initiated a sort of short account opening form for the simplified customers. So that also needs to be implemented. And in terms of the last CAMLCO conference, recent past CAMLCO conference, there are some other actionable which actually need to be implemented to all the banks. So that is why the AML department and these sort of FCC guys are actually working on those policy procedures, so that as soon as the situation is normal, so that they can implement those guidelines, talking to the stakeholders and also with the central bank. So actually we have a number of issues in our plate at this moment. And also we have actually informally advised all the CAMLCOs to jot down the priority issues in a document, so that they can prioritize their work, which needs to be done before, and what are the challenges they're going to face in the coming days, so that they can actually escalate those issues to their management and to the BFI or to the AACOBB at the due point of time. And obviously the CTR, STR and other returns will be piling up, and there will be a number of production order coming from the regulators. So obviously the resource will be also an issue, but obviously, as I said, the banks will be facing sort of an crisis, so the management will not allowing any extra resource. But obviously the AML staff and the colleagues that I've talked about, they're all willing to work for extra hours in the coming days, because they're almost bored at this moment, so they want work to be done. So they are ready to take the challenges. And obviously I have seen, which is also a very good sign from some of the colleagues, they are doing some e-learning courses at this moment, whether it is UNODC or Fintelekt or accounts or whatever. So they are trying to get into the seminars or some sort of an e-learning modules, so which is quite encouraging. And I've also advised our colleagues and staff to take that advantage of this extra time. Sarwar.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think since majority of the bankers are actually working from home, like in EBL, it's only 30% need to go to the office. And I think they should use this time, they should make productive use of this time. My advice would be to reflect on top AML risks that each bank has at this, and to get it, to learn about those top risks, you have to go through the audit reports and the, AML self-testing and other testing reports that you have. and try to strengthen the weak areas. Like there are processes. For instance, I know that in a majority of the banks, the periodic reviews are overdue. So that's one area where, some effort could be given. And like the BFIU, the regulator has issued a guideline and instructed the banks to prepare their policies on TBML. Now, this is a good time to, because the TBML guideline that the BFIU has issued, it's pretty comprehensive, and there are, 3 levels of escalation and a whole lot of things that were not there before. That's not how the trade business is being run nowadays. So they should study the guidelines carefully and then prepare a policy. And this is the right time to also, do a gap analysis to see where each bank, stands vis-a-vis the guidelines and prepare accordingly. So that would be a very good use. The other thing, I think, I've been always harping on this because the Wolfsburg correspondent banking due diligence questionnaire, that need to be studied also. This is a good time to do that and do a real gap analysis so that, you can prepare at least an action plan on closing those gaps. My advice would be these 3 things. If it is done, I think it'll be a very good use of this time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sarwar, and thanks Mamun as well for sharing these insights with us. I think this session has indeed given a lot of new knowledge about what's happening in Bangladesh, and I'm sure the Fintelekt community, especially in Bangladesh, will benefit immensely from your advice. So thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Shirish.
Thank you, Shirish.
Listeners, please join us again next Friday for the next session. This is Shirish from Fintelekt signing out.